Okay, today I'm going to talk about simplifying expressions because this is something that I want to review before we go on to learning about harder equations. So remember what an expression is. An expression is just it's something that has no equal sign in it. Equations have equal signs, expressions do not. When you simplify an expression, there are two things that you want to do. Number one, you want to get rid of parentheses. And to do that, we're going to use the distributive property. And the second thing you want to do is combine like terms or collect like terms. So the first thing I want to do is review distributive property. So let's start with a very simple problem. 3 times 2 plus 5. And I'm going to write that problem twice. This is an expression because it has no equal sign. I'm going to do it again over here. 3 times 2 plus 5. And you know the order of operations. First thing you do is parentheses. Second thing you do is exponents. Third thing you do is multiply and divide from left to right. And the fourth step is add and subtract from left to right. So there's two ways we can do this problem. We can follow order of operations and do the parentheses first. That means work inside the parentheses. So I can add those two things together and get 7. And I'm just going to bring my parentheses down and the 3 down. And that means we're going to multiply these together. So this is 3 times 7. 3 times 7 gives me 21. So there's a whole nother way we can do this problem, and we can do it by using what's called the distributive property. So instead of adding the 2 and the 5 together, first thing I can do is I can distribute this times 3 to both the 2 and the 5. And so I'm going to multiply those together. 3 times 2 gives me 6. 3 times a positive 5 gives me positive 15. And now I can add those together to get a 21. So the question is, why would you ever use this way when you can do that way? Well, because there's plenty of times where you can't do this. So let's do some examples here. Example 1. Let's take 3 times x plus 2. Okay, you can see this problem's a little different because we have a variable in it, and we cannot add x plus 2 together because they are not like terms. Like terms have to have the exact same variable. So I want to get rid of parentheses, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the distributive property. So I'm going to distribute the 3 to the x, and I'm going to distribute to the 2. Sometimes I used to call this the rainbow property, and I once called it the postman property. These are people in the house. This is the postman, and he must deliver to everybody in the house. So 3 times x, we just write it as 3x. And 3 times a positive 2 is a positive 6, so it becomes plus 6. And I can't add those together because they're not like terms, so we're going to stop right there. That's as far as we can go. All right, here's another example. Example 2. Let's try a negative 3 times x minus 4. Again, we're kind of stuck here. We cannot subtract those because they're not like terms. They don't have the same variable. Each of these terms has a different variable. This has a variable x. This one doesn't have a variable. So we're going to bust them out of that house by using the postman property. We're going to deliver mail to everybody in the house. So now we have a negative 3 times an x gives me a negative 3x. Now you got to be really careful here. My students used to make this mistake all the time. A lot of kids just want to copy down that negative sign right here. Don't do that. Think about what's going on here first. Notice what we're going to multiply together. We're going to multiply a negative 3 times a negative 4. Negative times a negative is a positive, so I write a plus. And then I just do the number part. 3 times 4 is 12. And again, these are not like terms. I cannot add them together. That's as far as I can go. Let's try example 3. Let's make it a little bit more complicated. Negative 5 minus the quantity x minus 2. All right, this one's a little weird. So notice what I have here, and this is important as well. Anytime you have parentheses with a negative sign out in front, a lot of people mess this up because they don't realize what this means. Anytime you have a negative sign out in front, you can say negative 3, or you could say the opposite of 3. And I can do the same thing here. I can say negative of all of that stuff, or I can say the opposite of all of that stuff. So just like we distributed a negative 3 here, here we're going to distribute a negative sign and get rid of these parentheses. If there was a plus sign out here, we wouldn't worry about it. We could just get rid of the parentheses. But since this says the opposite of all this stuff, we have to flip everything to its opposite. So I'm just going to copy down this negative 5 because I haven't used it yet. So now we have the opposite of x is negative x. And we have the opposite of negative 2 is a positive 2. So again, that negative, don't just copy it down. Figure out what it's going to be. The opposite of negative 2 is a positive 2. All right, this one we can keep going because we have some like terms. Like terms are variables that have, or terms that have the same variable, or terms that have no variable. So we can see that the x doesn't have a partner. So I'm going to write that out in front, negative x. It doesn't really matter. A lot of times people put the x out in front. And then these two guys have no variables, so we can collect those up. So this is a negative 5 and a positive 2, negative 5 and a positive 2. Which are there more of? There's more negatives, so negatives are going to win the race. So my answer is going to be negative. And this is going to win the race by 3. Because remember, 2 positives cancel out 2 of these negatives. That means there's 3 negatives left. And now I don't have any more like terms, so that's as far as I can go. Example 4, and this will be our last one in this set. Let's try another one similar to that. Negative 2 minus minus 3 times the quantity negative x minus 2. So people usually start freaking out when they have lots of negative signs, lots of minus signs. Remember, negatives and minuses are the same thing. So we start with parentheses. Can I add those together? No, they're not like terms, but I want to get rid of parentheses, so I'm going to use the distributive property. So I'm going to distribute a negative 3 here. Notice that I'm taking that sign out in front, whatever it is. That tells me what that sign is. Okay, so negative. So I'm going to just copy down that negative 2 because we aren't going to use it on this step. Negative 3 times a negative x. Negative times a negative is a positive, so I'm going to write plus. 3 times x is 3x. Negative times a negative is a positive, so I'm going to write plus. And 3 times 2 is 6. Now, just like the last problem, we're going to collect up like terms. There is no partner for this x here, so I'm just going to write it down, 3x. These guys are partners because they don't have any variables. Who's going to win the race here? Positives are going to win by 4. 2 negatives cancel out 2 positives. There's 4 positives left. That's it. Now I'm going to just talk about if there was something else out here, like maybe like a plus 6x. then you would just copy that down and say plus 6x. And then this line here, now these two guys would be like terms. And instead of having a 3x here, this 3x and that 6x would be a 9x there, plus 4. Okay, but we'll get rid of that. All right. Later, Gator.